io perché non parlo inglese e ringrazio Ulrich per questa occasione che ci propone per discutere temi che sono di grande attualità.
So, good morning. Thank you to Ulrich for organizing this event and for proposing that we talk about points that are so important today.
Il mio intervento conciso è una critica ai vari temi e problemi posti da Ulrich.
My intervention is based on some points and questions that Ulrich asked me to discuss.
Allora, io premetto che sono un filosofo e ho sempre lavorato su un pensiero di paesaggio.
So I start by saying I'm a philosopher, and what I've always been interested in the theory of the landscape and place.
E per questo io parlo sempre di paesaggio anche quando parliamo di città, perché la città fa parte di un dato paesaggio, però evito l'astrazione di parlare del paesaggio in senso astratto, perché per quello dico pensiero di paesaggio e non del.
So I'm always thinking about the landscape, even when I'm thinking about the city, but not as non come cose separate.
Come no, cioè di solito si parla del paesaggio come un'astrazione, con l'articolo,
Okay.
mentre di paesaggio e del dato paesaggio, delle realtà, delle varie realtà.
So I'm not talking about the landscape as an abstraction, but I'm talking about it as an actual place.
Ecco. E quindi il quadro classico su cui noi stiamo discutendo è quello della polis città.
So the classical framework that we're thinking about is the polis, the city.
Ecco. E noi sappiamo che il primo filosofo che ha analizzato la città reale è Aristotele.
So we know that the first philosopher to analyze the actual city was Aristotle.
Mentre prima di lui Platone non ha fatto altro che idealizzare un'idea di città, l'ideale che poi stiamo cercando, no? L'idea di città, perché la città reale per lui è corruttibile.
Whereas Plato talked about the ideal city that we're here to talk about, because the actual city can be corrupted.
E c'è un dato di fatto su cui dobbiamo riflettere molto. Per Aristotele la polis, la città, esiste per natura, è un fenomeno naturale.
So for Aristotle, the polis is a natural phenomenon.
E questo è molto importante perché nella Grecia antica non c'è ancora questo distacco tra uomo e natura che entra nel moderno.
And this is important because in ancient Greece there isn't yet this distinction or separation between people and nature as there is today.
Ma non dice solo che è un fenomeno naturale, ma la città esiste per vivere bene.
So I'm not talking only about a natural phenomenon, but the city was seen as a place or a way of living well.
Ed è un concetto molto importante sul quale ritorniamo.
Okay, which is a very important concept, the idea of the good life, living well, and we'll return to this concept.
Quindi a questo punto rientriamo nel progetto di Ulrich. Il tema, cioè il carattere guida come la città verde. Noi cerchiamo la città verde, la città naturale. Spesso confondiamo il naturale con il verde.
Okay, so now we'll go back to the theme we were going to talk about, which is thinking about a natural city, but often we confuse or conflate the idea of a natural city and a green city.
Quindi abbiamo due problemi da risolvere
Okay, so there's
nella nostra discussione.
Okay, so we have two problems to resolve in our discussion.
Il tema problema dello spazio città,
Okay, the first is the space in the city.
cioè la città come spazio o la città come luogo.
Okay, the city as a space or the city as a place.
E poi dobbiamo intenderci sul naturale e sul verde.
And we also have to define what we mean by natural or nature and green.
Per esempio, tornando ancora all'antichità, cioè l'idea della città verde ha uno sfondo mitico.
The idea of a green city has its roots in mythology.
Ricordo solo nel mito la città di Anfione,
So if you think about mythology, the myth of Anfione,
che è stata creata con la musica.
which was created with music.
Quindi c'è un'armonia,
So there's a harmony,
l'idea di un'armonia.
the idea of
Con la
harmony.
musica, Anfione creano un suonando.
Suonando. So it's created by playing an instrument. The city.
Ecco.
By music.
Quindi io diciamo in alternativa come diciamo, proposta la visione del mondo dell'idea di città verde, cioè l'etica della cura della città. Noi dobbiamo parlare di un'etica della cura
So we need to
della
talk.
città.
We need to talk about an ethics of caring for the city.
Ecco, invece di verde proporrei di parlare di giardino.
Instead of talking about green, I propose that we talk about the garden.
Ecco, ma giardino come metafora,
Garden as a
metafora delle relazioni
metaphor for the relationships
tra tutti gli esseri, tra tutti gli elementi cosiddetti naturali,
the relationships between all the beings that are all natural beings
che formano la bellezza di un giardino.
that make up the beauty of the garden. So relationships.
Ma in questo giardino, questa figura del giardino che qui vediamo a Ferriolo, ci sono uomini, animali, piante, minerali, cioè quello che una volta prima della spaccatura tra uomo e natura era l'insieme del vivente.
So in a garden there are people, there are animals, there are plants, there are minerals, and these things were all once connected before they were seen as being separated.
Quindi il giardino come metafora delle relazioni,
So the garden again as a metaphor for relations.
per un luogo di vita richiama da una parte il ben vivere di Aristotele, l'euzen, ben vivere di Aristotele, e dall'altra parte il bien vivere delle popolazioni indigene sudamericane.
So the garden as a metaphor requires us to think about, on the one hand, this idea of Aristotle of the good life, living well and ethically, and on the other hand, we can think about indigenous communities and in South America, Sud America. The relations.
Il bien vivere come quello che è praticamente che sono state distrutte dagli europei, e quello che rimane adesso viene recuperato.
Okay, so the ways that indigenous communities lived with nature and practiced a kind of the good life, but those communities were destroyed by Western interventions.
Allora, ci sono due elementi che Ulrich ha proposto: la storia come idea guida dell'Occidente,
So,
e poi
Ulrich,
il futuro, le comunità future. Da una parte la storia e dall'altra parte il futuro.
so Ulrich had proposed two ideas. One, the idea of history as the guiding idea of the West, and the second as thinking about the future.
Il problema che ha posto è il collegare il futuro con il passato.
So the problem he proposed was how to link the future to the past.
Quindi in questo contesto io avevo elaborato 5 proposizioni per una progettazione di paesaggio.
Okay, so based on this, I've come up with 5 propositions for how to conduct an analysis for planning a place.
Io ho insegnato per 15 anni estetica della progettazione al Politecnico di Milano, quindi in questo contesto rientrano le 5 proposizioni.
So I've taught for 15 years and I teach aesthetics, and so I'm drawing on what I teach to come up with these 5 propositions.
Allora, il collegamento del futuro e passato, io parlo di racconto, il rapporto tra racconto e narrazione, però andiamo per ordine. 5 proposizioni di cui c'è un...
So we'll go in order, 5 propositions.
Il primo dato di fatto è la vivibilità di un luogo.
Okay, so first we have to think about the visibility of a
Quindi,
place.
l'orizzonte che collega il futuro con il passato è dato dallo sguardo e la conoscenza. Io devo osservare per conoscere il luogo.
So the horizon that links the future and the past is provided to us by looking and by knowledge.
E questa è la conoscenza ha 2 forme distinte,
And this form of knowledge has 2 forms
ma convergenti.
that are distinct but converge.
Una indirizzata a un universale, cioè la teoria, quando noi guardiamo in profondità l'universale, cioè tutto ciò che vediamo.
So one of these is universal, and it's theory. So when we look towards the horizon and sort of the wholeness of what we're looking at.
L'altra legata al particolare,
The other is linked to the particular.
e questa è l'aesthesis, da cui viene l'estetica, cioè la sensibilità.
And the other, so you have theory on one hand, the other is aesthesis, from which we get the word aesthetics, and this is feeling, or sensitivity, feeling.
E quindi entriamo così nel luogo,
And so we enter into place,
nel nostro caso la città,
in our case the city,
e leggiamo le sue geometrie palesi e nascoste.
and we can start to read its overt and hidden geometries.
Il primo elemento che colpisce lo sguardo
The first thing that captures our gaze
è il quadro d'insieme
is
del fenomeno ampio e complesso dello spettacolo.
So the first thing that captures our gaze is the overall phenomenon of the fullness and the complexity of all that we see.
Cioè quello che con una bella espressione l'aveva definito Oederlin,
Okay,
cioè l'uno in se stesso distinto,
and this was
cioè
defined by
uno che è distinto in se stesso.
Hölderlin as the thing distinct in itself.
E che che questo termine sta a significare l'interconnessione vivente.
This term means the interconnection of a living interconnection, the interconnection of living things.
Un'interconnessione che si riconosce in ogni oggetto,
This
in un paesaggio, un fiume in particolare o qualsiasi altra cosa.
we see this interconnection in every living thing, in a river, in a landscape, in everything that we see.
Questo tema dell'interconnessione vivente è oggi ripreso dagli antropologi contemporanei.
So today, contemporary anthropologists have returned to this idea of the living interconnection.
Sono poi gli antropologi che una volta avevano separato la cultura dalla natura.
And these are the same anthropologists that once
Pensate solo allo strutturalismo.
Yeah.
La cultura e la natura, no? Mentre adesso le nuove generazioni sono l'interconnessione, cioè le corrispondenze. C'è io per esempio, io cito qui.
So these are the same anthropologists that first tried to separate nature and culture, but now a new generation of anthropologists is trying to reunite these things.
Per esempio Tim Ingold, che è questo libro Corrispondenze.
Like Tim Ingold in his book Correspondences 2021.
Quindi una via per il superamento della dicotomia natura e cultura, che è uno dei punti fondamentali di questa discussione, dove l'uomo è parte integrante dell'interconnessione.
Okay, so one path towards going beyond this dichotomy between nature and culture is to see people, to see mankind as a fundamental part of this interconnection, and that's a fundamental point that I want to make.
Quindi non separato.
Not separate.
Tutto è connesso.
Everything is connected.
Quindi noi partiamo da uno spazio fisico.
So
no?
we start from a physical space.
E da questo spazio fisico che noi osserviamo, io ho elaborato anni fa un'altra metafora per le mie 5 proposizioni.
Okay, so starting from this physical space, years ago I came up with another metaphor to think about my 5 propositions.
Una metafora per leggere il paesaggio.
A metaphor that can hold up this landscape.
Per fare quella che è l'analisi inventiva.
Per fare quella?
Che l'analisi inventiva.
Okay.
Cioè,
To create a kind of
per poter poi proporre invenzioni.
To create a kind of imaginative analysis to support these 5 propositions.
E quindi dare delle idee progettuali.
And so to come up with ideas for planning.
Quindi il teatro greco, quando parlo di teatro mi riferisco al teatro greco.
Okay, so I'm going to speak about theater, and when I talk about theater, I'm referring to the ancient Greek theater.
Il teatro greco aveva una importanza fondamentale per la conoscenza del paesaggio.
So Greek theater had a fundamental importance for the understanding of the landscape.
La scena era aperta sul paesaggio.
It was open to the landscape. The stage and the whole scene was open to
Dopodiché, incominciando dall'anfiteatro romano, si chiude.
And then with the arrival of the Roman amphitheater, it all was enclosed.
Il teatro diventa altra cosa.
It became another thing.
Mentre per i greci servivano per la paideia, cioè per la formazione, per la conoscenza, soprattutto per la conoscenza della città, del territorio, di come comportarsi.
So for the Greeks, the theater was there for learning, for knowledge, for people to understand how to live, and especially with respect to the city.
L'etica viene da qui.
Ethics comes from this.
Ethos è il luogo, e il teatro con la recita dei miti, come diceva Aristotele, con la connessione dei miti, si insegna a comportarsi.
So ethics comes from this, from mythology being presented in the theater, and people learning about the city and about themselves from that.
Solo così la città è salva.
This is the only way for the city to be saved.
C'è più etica nella tragedia greca che in tutta la filosofia.
There's more ethics in Greek tragedy than in all of philosophy.
E quindi il famoso contrasto che il cosiddetto ethos nomos, cioè tra il luogo e la regola che ognuno deve seguire per salvaguardare il luogo,
So
cioè,
the dichotomy between ethos and nomos,
Sì.
between ethics.
ethos è il luogo, nomos è la parte che ciascuno deve giocare, cioè il
Ethics is-
pascolo in origine. E il pascolo significa la competenza di ciascuno, perché il pascolo era la parte data a ciascuno.
Okay, so
Cioè ogni cittadino aveva il suo pascolo, cioè il suo ruolo.
So between ethos, which is place, and nomos, which is the part that each person is meant to play and to be responsible for.
Quindi questo è molto importante perché era la condizione sine qua non per la salvezza della città.
And this is it's the sine qua non for the salvation of the city. You have to have this.
Ed è una concezione che noi abbiamo completamente persa.
And we've completely lost this idea.
E questo era un dato naturale.
Questo è?
Un dato naturale.
And this is
Era un fatto naturale.
This was a natural thing.
Cioè, poi naturalmente quando la città va in crisi non diventa legge.
When the city goes into crisis, nomos turns into law.
Diventa legge per obbligare.
To obligate people to what they what previously would have just been the
E allora
role of
abbiamo
the
i nomoi
individual.
di Platone per obbligare a... Allora, quindi prendiamo il teatro come luogo e come spazio vissuto e connessione dei miti. Dal teatro abbiamo...
So we'll go back to the theater come like this place.
Quindi, connessione dei miti. Il suo ingresso scenico. Noi ingresso scenico. Allora, queste 5 proposizioni che sono uno, visibilità.
So going back to my 5 propositions, first visibility,
La visibilità è la luce
light,
e anche il ricettacolo, tutto ciò che si genera.
and a receptacle for everything that is generated.
Quella che i greci chiamavano cora, cioè anche territorio. Cora e territorio, l'Iceletos e la Celapolis.
So the Greeks called this the chora, the chorus, or
Il
territory.
territorio in cui nasce la polis.
The territory, the land in which the city is born, the polis is born.
E quella visibilità dà la possibilità di osservare la generazione della polis, cioè lo sviluppo, generazione.
That gives us the possibility of observing the generation of the polis.
Ed è anche il luogo di Dike, cioè della giustizia, l'idea che tutto vede,
And it's also the
il
place.
bene e il male.
It's also the place of Dike, the goddess of justice, who sees everything, the good and the bad.
E attenzione, il male non esiste come concetto nostro, il male è il bene non fatto.
So good. When I say bad, good, and bad, I don't mean in our conception today. It's just it's just a fact.
Invece poi secondo proposizione, in questo tempo noi vediamo la temporalità.
The second proposition is temporality.
La temporalità che sono con la temporalità che è praticamente il tempo eterno. I greci avevano 2 termini di tempo. Aion, il tempo eterno, e Chronos, il tempo e la temporaneità particolare.
So the Greeks
E
had
Chrono divora i suoi figli.
the Greeks had 2 terms for they had temporality for eternal time, and then they had a term for a particular time. Temporaneità.
Il temporaneità, cioè Chrono è la temporaneità, mentre Aion è la temporalità.
Okay, so aione is temporality, this eternal time, and then temporaneity is a particular time.
Che cos'è la temporaneità?
What do I mean by this?
Con lo spazio della vita umana, di ogni vita umana.
Just the briefness.
Noi siamo temporanei nell'ambito della temporalità, la storia, l'arte, poi per chi crede l'eternità della natura, finché noi non distruggiamo il pianeta.
So the difference between these two forms of time is one is eternal, temporality is eternal, and the other regards just the brief fleeting moment that each person is alive in against the backdrop of history and myth and everything, and eternity. If you believe in that, it's a quick blip on the map, and that's only if we don't end up destroying the planet.
Se c'è qualche domanda mi possono interrompere.
Should we take some questions?
No, it's okay.
Kein Problem.
I just wanted to make a short explanation. Chronos. Chronos is the kind of time of temporality we understand as time. It's and therefore Chronos is devouring his own children. The things are passing by. The buildings, the human beings. Important is in this context of this Greek conception of polis and the non-dichotomy between nature and culture, the synoikia, the nomos and the ethos is this aeon. This is the other kind of time. That's it.
Per esempio, io ho parlato prima del nomos, no? Nomos è temporaneità, mentre l'ethos è temporalità, perché il nomos è il nostro ruolo intorno della temporalità dell'ethos.
Nomos represents our role within the eternal time.
Poi il quarto elemento è l'accessibilità.
The fourth element is accessibility.
L'accessibilità, cioè che nel teatro è il parodos, cioè il ruolo di passaggio nel teatro.
In Greek theater is called parados.
L'accessibilità è l'accesso sia alla temporalità che alla temporaneità.
The access that Greek theater gives us to both temporality and temporanity.
Ed è un elemento fondamentale.
It's a fundamental element.
Poiché permette di osservare ciò che nella contemporaneità, cioè l'osservatore nel contemporaneo può osservare le diverse epoche.
So because it allows the observer and the contemporary observer to see the bigger picture,
della temporalità.
Of temporality.
Ecco. Le diverse epoche, cioè la temporalità, è composta da diversi racconti, dei diversi racconti che poi formano il quinto elemento, la narrazione.
So these different ages that can be observed in temporality bring us to the fifth element that I'm going to discuss.
Singoli racconti, perché ogni temporaneità, ogni epoca è un racconto che rientra nel paesaggio, nella narratività.
Which is narrativity,
e quindi abbiamo alla fine la narrazione, cioè la lettura completa di un luogo dall'inizio ad oggi, però proiettato verso il futuro.
So the fifth element is narration, because each of these different ages is a story and thinking about how to read the landscape as a story.
Adesso io cerco rapidamente di andai altri progetti. Quindi il problema è il superamento della dicotomia natura e cultura.
Okay, so
Perché
quickly
natura,
quickly I'm going to just touch on a few problems. So one is the dichotomy of natura e
sì,
of nature.
il superamento della dicotomia.
How to get past the
Cioè,
dichotomy.
dobbiamo superarlo, non più parlare per contrapposizioni.
How can we get past this dichotomy
Se
and not
continuiamo a parlare per contrapposizioni non risolviamo nulla, anzi peggioriamo la situazione, perché questa contrapposizione ha portato al disastro planetario.
because if we don't get past that kind of nature culture dichotomy, we're not going to be able to resolve anything, and that's what has gotten us to this point where we're risking the entire planet.
La natura, per esempio, la natura oggi è un ideale intellettuale
Nature today is an intellectual ideal.
ed è un termine astratto,
It's an
utilizzato
abstract term.
in particolare da chi abita in città.
It's an abstract term mostly used by people who live in cities.
Tutti i cittadini cercano la natura.
All people that live in cities, all citizens, they're looking for nature.
Per cui un albero è messo lì rappresenta la natura,
So if you put a tree in a city, that's nature.
però continuano a non vivere naturalmente.
But they don't live in a natural way, they don't live naturally.
Quindi l'ideale della natura è con la vegetazione, c'è una collegazione con l'accostamento con il colore verde.
And so we get to this idea of just associating nature with the color green.
Per esempio a Milano ha fatto clamore il grattacielo, il bosco in città,
So
fatto con alberi.
in Milan there was a big uproar over the bosco in città, the tree, the forest in the city, which was a high rise, a green high rise. Il grattacielo verde.
Dobbiamo stare attenti alla trappola della città verde.
So we need to be careful about falling into the trap of the green city.
Perché può trasformarsi nel peggiore degli artifici.
Because it can lead us to just the worst of artificiality.
Perché la città dobbiamo dire, è il bene e il male della convivenza umana.
The city is the good, it represents the good and the bad of the way that people live together.
Il bene perché non c'è luogo di accoglienza migliore, tutti vanno.
It's good because it's the best way for people to live together.
Il male perché la città consuma tante di energie naturali.
But it's bad because the city consumes so much natural energy or resources.
Noi come immaginiamo la città? Cioè c'è tutta una storia dell'ideale, della città ideale.
How can we reimagine the city? There's a whole history of imagining ideal cities.
E lì bisogna stare molto attenti.
But we need to be careful.
Perché il Rinascimento italiano ci ha dato tante esempi, tante due di città ideali, tante creazioni. Io ho studiato a Urbino.
So the Renaissance gave us lots of examples of ideal cities. I studied Urbino,
che è una delle patrie della città ideale, Piero della Francesca.
Ferriolo della Francesca's ideal city.
Ebbene, bisogna negare che tutte queste idee delle città ideali, anche il Trocchio, tutte, io non so perché li conoscete bene tutti gli esempi, ebbene, non c'è un filo d'erba.
So you all know these examples.
Tutte architetture, meravigliose architetture.
You know all these
Ma non
marvelous.
c'è un filo d'erba, non si pensa alle relazioni. L'essere umano non c'è.
You know all these marvelous examples of ideal cities, but with all these beautiful architectural ideal marvels, there's not a blade of grass. There's no idea. There's no sense of the interaction of living things.
Poi quindi dobbiamo fare uno sforzo per immaginare città differenti.
So we have to really push ourselves to imagine new cities, different cities.
Io sono d'accordo che con anche il Laudatio Si di Papa Francesco
I agree with the Laudato Si by Pope Francis.
che il problema ecologico della città non si risolve con l'ecologia di classe,
That the ecological problems of the city can't
che
be
hanno dei bei edifici per chi è ricco.
resolved in an ecology of class when you start creating beautiful buildings for the rich.
Risolvendo i problemi ambientali dati dalla povertà.
But we have to resolve the environmental problems that come from poverty.
Perché povertà e degrado delle città vanno pari passo.
Because poverty and the degradation of the city go together, they come together.
Quindi cerchiamo un'idea guida, cerchiamo un'idea guida per
So we need some kind of guiding principle.
Tanto io vorrei darvi due elementi di riflessione.
And I want to give you two elements to
Uno è
reflect on.
di Immanuel Kant,
One comes from Immanuel Kant,
Eden Enoch,
and that is Eden and Enoch.
cioè dal paradiso e la città. La città nasce col male, però è sede di brillante miseria.
The city, the idea that the city comes, it is born from the bad, it's born from evil, but it's the center of brilliant misery.
E poi l'altro è Max Weber,
And the other is Max Weber.
che dice gli abitanti di una città non dispongono dell'uso adeguato alle loro occorrenze di pascoli e boschi,
And he says that the inhabitants of a city,
come accade invece nel villaggio, eccetera. È un testo che conoscete tutti.
the inhabitants of a city can't take advantage of the meadows and the forest that what you would be able to in a town or a village.
Quindi per rispondere, cercare un po' una soluzione, rispondere alle domande dell'idea guida per l'Occidente. Uno, ho detto, uscire dal dualismo, natura e cultura.
So just to sum up, to respond to this, this looking for some kind of planning, guiding principle. One is to overcome the dichotomy, nature and culture.
Quindi uscire, ricerca dello spazio ideale uscendo dalla natura artefatta, come ritorna la natura.
And to go beyond this, an artificial form of nature.
E con il problema dell'interculturalità,
Interculturality.
molto importante. L'interculturalità come non intendo la presenza delle città, ma il fatto che non esiste solo un pensiero eurocentrico.
So I don't mean necessarily like different groups of people living in a place, but just that there's no such thing as a particular Eurocentric way of
Ma
thinking.
esistono altre culture, esistono altre culture che insegnano il vivere bene, che il vivere bene che non è il vivere meglio.
So there are other cultures that teach a good life kind of
Perché
way.
dice, noi parliamo di vivere meglio,
Not living better, but living
in
well.
termini
in
assoluti,
in
meglio.
termini etici.
Cioè meglio avere l'automobile, avere ricchezza, mentre c'è il vivere bene,
So it's
che è il
not
vivere secondo le relazioni, secondo relazioni cosiddette.
So it's not about having a better car, having more things, but they teach living well in terms of relationships and relations.
E quindi con questo, quindi vivere meglio, poi ripeto, la metafora del giardino come soluzione.
And I come back to the idea of the garden as a
Infine,
solution.
l'altra guida idea, io prenderei un'altra metafora che prendo in prestito dalle mie esperienze sudamericane, la Pachamama.
Okay, so I'm going to take one more metaphor that comes
L'idea
from
della
my...
Pachamama, che è abitare il mondo, l'essere nel mondo, cioè abitare il mondo con un insieme di tutti, tenendo conto di tutti gli esseri viventi, non di una natura astratta. Non parlare più di natura e cultura, ma quella che è la totalità. E qui torniamo sempre a Green dell'uno in se stesso distinto.
So I'm coming to, this last metaphor comes from my experiences in South America, and I want to think about the idea of the Pachamama that represents living in the world, being in the world, not separating nature from culture, but sort of this integrated idea of relationships.
E
Again,
poi 5 minuti.
5 minuti.
in 5 more minutes,
Finito.
and then I'm
E
done.
poi l'altro quindi tornare al dialogo originario,
So
che era sostanza del primo paradiso, del luogo ideale dell'origine.
okay, so to go back to the original question, which was the substance of paradise, the first ideal city.
Il mito del giardino che costituisce il paradiso,
The myth of the garden that was paradise.
riprendendo anche il ritorno del sacro,
And the return of the sacred.
perché noi abbiamo perso il senso del sacro.
We've lost the sense of
Abbiamo
sacredness.
spostato nel trascendente.
We've lost the sense of the sacred and the idea of the
Quello
transcendent.
che è precisamente questo, quello che Walter Rotto chiamava Eben dir.
What Walter Otto?
Lui l'ha capito, precisamente questo, Eben dir.
You can explain that one.
Io tutti cioè olistico, quindi avere una visione olistica,
So having a holistic vision.
olistica delle cose. Quindi e ritornando alla quella che era la parola vera del mito,
And going back to
questo,
myth.
cioè un certo comportamento per non commettere il peccato hubris.
Myth and the way it teaches to have a certain kind of behavior
Perché
so
il
that we
mito-
don't commit hubris.
Perché il mito è un'istanza multiculturale, che come tale naturale. Significa che tutte le culture hanno un mito. Un mito
Myths
dietro
are
alle spalle. Non c'è cultura che non abbia un mito alle spalle, che guida il comportamento.
Myths are universal. Every culture has the idea of myths that teach us.
In questo io chiudo col paradiso. Il grande luogo ideale della storia è sempre stato il paradiso. No?
So I close by saying that the great ideal city has
E
always been the
io,
idea of paradise.
avvalendomi di un'indicazione del poeta portoghese Pessoa,
So the Portuguese poet Pessoa,
ho cercato di ricostruire in un progetto, in un grande progetto, i diversi paradisi di perché ogni cultura così ha un proprio paradiso, come diceva anche Schiller.
so every culture has its own idea of paradise.
Ho fatto un progetto di giardini paradisi attraverso l'arte del sogno.
And I worked on a project about paradises and gardens. That's the art of the
Un progetto
dream.
di diversi giardini paradisi attraverso l'arte del sogno.
So looking at
Ho
the
fatto il progetto.
so my project was looking at gardens and ideal spaces of paradise through the art of dreaming.
Questo per mostrare un ideale eterno.
To demonstrate an eternal ideal.
Many thanks. Many thanks.
Thanks.
To you both. Also for the translation. To start very short before we go into the discussion. What Massimo presented as this Greek concept, these are, first of all, not outdated past concepts. This is the very sense of longing of the green political ecological movement today. It's the very base of the idea and ideal of a green city, to reunite nature with culture. And one central concept, in my eyes at least, is this synoikia, the living together in the Greek polis. Also that nature and culture expressed in the city are not divided entities. And this non-division, this breaking the barrier, the dichotomy between nature and culture is exactly an indirect, it's a thesis, an indirect longing of the recent Green City movement as a quasi-religious movement coming out of our Christian heritage. The Christian heritage is we have lost paradise because it's the fault of the human being itself. This is a unique concept of eternal guiltiness. How to get rid of this? Wir haben es vermasselt und deshalb sind wir aus dem Paradies rausgeflogen. So, and the second thing is related to this. We have to regain the paradise in the future. We have two possibilities: the religious variant in the narrow sense of religion, in believing in something in formal terms, is the heavenly Jerusalem. Also there will be a paradise at the end of all days, and in the meantime we live on this earth in a kind of interregnum, in a medium time, less good. Also we have been drawn out from the first paradise, we are vermasselt. Now we are in the interregnum, also the world as it is, with its chronos, and then we come to the second paradise. This is a notion of progress. It's a notion of condemning the world as it is, as non-livable place. The final life will come at the end of all days. It's not now. Now I can live in misery, have a bad job, live in shitty conditions. It doesn't matter. The final paradise will come at the end of all days.
Are you telling me that, or us, that that's why we are destroying the earth as it is right now?
Yeah. This is one
That's
point.
right, because there
This
comes
is context.
paradise at the end.
Yeah. I want to come back to Massimo,
right.
but this I want to counterpose as a another perspective, and to counterpose this Christian perspective with Massimo's and what Massimo presented. This original Greek perspective is the sense of longing. Das ist die Sehnsucht, wieder dahin zu kommen. In the polis, in the synoikia. Please.
In Germany, there's a different understanding of nature and garden. Nature being wild and not organized, and garden being organized by mankind.
C'è una diversità in terminologia in Germania, però.
Can you just repeat quickly?
Yeah. In Germany, we have a different understanding of nature and garden. Nature being wild, non-organized by mankind.
So qui in Germania c'è un'idea diversa di natura e di giardino, natura e selvaggia. And garden.
Natura not touched by mankind.
Natura che l'uomo non ha toccata.
Like Bosco. No? Bosco is the wild nature.
Garden being organized by mankind.
Il giardino è organizzato dall'uomo.
And
La
the interesting
naturale, il giardino è organizzato dall'uomo.
And the interesting thing is that paradise is referred as a garden.
Ma però paradiso, parliamo di paradiso come giardino, che sarebbe organizzato.
Meaning that there is somebody organizing nature to make it a paradise.
Che qualcuno organizza per creare il paradiso.
Which would be from Christian understanding God, who organized nature into a garden, into a paradise garden.
L'idea cristiana di Dio che ha organizzato il giardino.
And the interesting thing today is that we are looking at paradise as nature. as not organized.
Però oggi stiamo parlando di paradiso come natura e non come cosa organizzata.
And that we think of intervention by mankind as a negative thing.
E cominciamo a pensare all'intervento dell'uomo come cosa negativa.
And from what you said, I understand that the Greek vision on nature is something unorganized, meaning natural.
Però da quello che hai detto sembra che per i greci la natura era una cosa non toccata dall'uomo, non organizzata dall'uomo.
Allora, non mi sembra che la natura, bisogna superare queste categorie.
We have to get past these kinds of categories.
Sono concetti astratti i nostri, quelli della natura toccata dall'uomo, a parte il fatto che non c'è angolo al mondo non toccato dall'uomo.
So they're abstract categories, but there's not any part of the world that isn't touched by people.
Io sto discutendo in termini olistici, cioè dell'insieme di tutti gli esseri che in un certo senso formano quello che noi pensiamo la natura. No?
But I'm thinking in holistic terms in the sense of all the interrelated, or all the relations between creatures that form nature.
Allora, quello che invece io ho cercato di sottolineare è la metafora del giardino.
So I just wanted to emphasize the metaphor of the garden.
Io ho scritto un libro,
I wrote a book
pubblicato tra l'altro dal Einaudi, che è il miglior editore italiano.
that was published by
È un
Venturi.
libro molto diffuso sull'idea di trasformare in giardino il mondo, trasformare il mondo in un giardino.
And the idea of transforming the world into a garden.
Questo significa di avere la figura del giardino
This means taking the idea of the garden
come metafora delle relazioni,
as a metaphor for relations,
di un ritorno dell'uomo nel suo ambito
a
naturale,
return of man to his natural environment,
quello delle relazioni con tutti gli altri esseri viventi,
his relationship with all other living things,
pietre comprese,
including rocks.
Cioè che è un ideale che è presente per esempio nel vivere bene delle culture indigene.
An idea that's present in indigenous cultures and the idea of a good life, living well.
Quindi io parlo di Nino in questo senso, come metafora.
So I'm just using the garden
Io
in this way.
spero, noi cerchiamo il paradiso, no? Ma invece cerchiamo di trasformare il mondo in un giardino.
So not to look for paradise, but how we can transform the world into a garden in this sense.
Quindi avendo l'attenzione a tutti gli elementi che compongono il mondo.
With attention to all the elements that make up the world.
And I think this is a basic difference. This understanding is essential. This is a basic difference to the Christian, classical Occidental Christian concept. It's fundamentally different. And the transversion of this classical Christian concept into the modernist Weltbild, into the modernist age in the Muse of Progress. But you had a comment. So we have to keep this in mind. So here we have the ideals of the Green City today.
Yeah. It is partly already answered, but maybe I just would like to add something. Of course, nature is not organized. It is much better organized than any garden, but in a completely different way. It is done by all the elements that are there, but not by the human people so much. Even all nature, there are even people gone, as he said, there is almost nothing left. There is no influence of human beings. And as you might know, in these times we speak also often about nature gardens or natural gardening, and that includes that we go more to the organization that is given by the nature itself. And wild is not, it is not wild, that is our definition, our look as a human being on that piece of land.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to interject in there that nature as an idea might, how we perceive nature, it is also an issue how we form our own reality. Meaning, what is reality? We are living in an age wherein our reality is increasingly mediated with my cell phone, with the signals, the Zoom. We are divorcing ourselves, creating something which is a virtual reality. We are divorcing ourselves from nature as a certain reality which gives us reality.
I think that this is an important aspect as God. This original concept, this Greek concept, which is not a Greek concept but a wish, no? Until today, we have been separated. We have no aesthesis, we have no capability of a holistic view, and this has been enhanced by a technological divide of us as natural beings, also as communal beings, eager to communicate with us in a direct way. We have been separated from our own nature as human beings, plus we have been separated from nature, as garden, as whatever, and now we live in a mediated artifact. And we are formatted in some way. So our working group was concerned with format, but this is another discussion, but related to it. If we live in a second nature, a seemingly nature, which is only natural because we get acquainted to it, we get used to it. In fact, we are living in the second nature of mediated formats. Our life is formatted in a high degree, and this is not natural. And this is not, as Massimo had it, this longing for unification, to see a holistic view, but to live it with aesthesis. One part of the knowing of knowledge is intuition, feeling, aesthesis, to see the things. It's not aesthetics of design, it's a holistic capability of conceive things, and with the mediated environment, it's impossible. How to conceive in a holistic way my iPhone? This is bullshit, this is only an instrument, but the instrument is dominating me. Next one.
I have a small question.
Yeah.
I forgot, I didn't catch the third preposition. Was it light?
La terza proposizione era?
La terza,
Sì.
cioè la temporaneità.
No, era no, sì, yeah.
Temporaneità.
Yeah, so temporaneità,
Temporaneità.
Okay.
which is the idea, so instead of the eternity of time, it's the sort of more fleeting time represented by like a human lifespan,
Esattamente, l'arco della vita umana.
the arc of the human life,
Okay.
sort of against that bigger
Yeah,
sweep
okay.
of the eternity.
Che allora c'è una cosa importante, l'arco della vita umana che costituisce un racconto.
But it can be seen as a kind of story
Un racconto all'interno della narrazione.
within a larger narration.
Okay. Yeah, I got it all, but I
Okay.
thought it
Yeah.
belonged all to
Come il capitolo in un libro.
Like a chapter in a book.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there other thoughts, comments, ideas? Is this fundamental what he presented? What are your ideas? Your thoughts, your intuition, your view on what he presented?
I was thinking about the question what was posed by you regarding if God somehow formatted nature into the garden, because I was relating this proposition with your propositions you made, and I just took some notes, and when I'm rereading my notes I'm thinking about that God, or the mythology of the Bible, basically retells exactly these propositions in the Genesis. So at the beginning there was the Word, then God made light, so one of your propositions, then God made time, temporality, and so on. So somehow you're retelling the Genesis.
No, che stai toccando tutti i punti della Genesi. Hai toccato tutti i punti della Genesi. Sì, nel senso la luce, Dio ha creato la luce, poi il tempo, la temporalità, cioè tutte queste cose.
Del mito. No.
I know I'm provoking you. I know I'm
Ci sta
provoking.
provocando, ti sta provocando.
Allora, teatron, tea, c'è
Yeah, I got you.
la luce, la dea e la vista. Quindi prima di così. La luce in tutte le culture è fondamentale.
So light's fundamental in all cultures. And he's thinking
Ancora
about myth,
prima
not
della
the Bible.
Genesi. Ancora prima della Genesi.
Even before Genesis.
Perché c'è un punto della Genesi che non va bene.
There's something in Genesis that's not correct.
Yeah.
La natura, quella che noi chiamiamo natura,
What we call nature
è un oggetto,
is an object,
non è più un soggetto.
not a subject.
Attenzione, questa è la differenza.
And that's
Non
the
è più un
difference.
soggetto. Ed è allora che l'uomo domina la natura.
And so from that point, that's
E
when man
Cartesio, Descartes, e Descartes l'ha sottolineato.
that's from that point on, man starts seeing himself as dominating nature, and then we have Descartes.
And this was decisive for the entire modern age, and it causes the ecological problems of today, amongst others, and the social problems we have. What do you think about this concept? As I want to go back to the myth in a modern form. And the modern form of the myth is to re-establish unification with nature through the green city. What do you think in this context? What do you think about the concept of the synoikia, of the living together? Can it be achieved again in mediated environments? We are far away from nature, miles away. How we can get back to ourselves, to our nature, and to the nature of nature? And what's about this living together concept he presented? Is it viable today? Please.
Well, I think it is increasingly difficult in this technological and AI sort of environment.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence, we are constantly working on the distance between us and that reality with which we create something, or I'm looking at nature which forms jointly by way of culture our own reality. The problem today, as I see it, we don't have a culture is a joint agreement of a different group, how we do things, how we shape our own, well, destiny or environment. But we are not doing that. We are completely divorcing, and we have, well, in the States and in so many other things, there's a complete divorce. Meaning, we don't seem to agree as a culture on certain ideas which could connect us. Well, you know, they're all ideas. I mean, reality is some kind of a common agreement. News, sort of things.
It's a common agreement, but reality is also reality. No? We are going socially down, we are going ecologically down, and we have these shitty iPhones separating us from the rest of the world.
Right.
No?
Even the car started with separating us from each other. While you were walking or
walking,
driving
that's right.
right, you could talk to each other. For me, the cars were the first thing to separate people from each other.
Yeah.
To me, this social media is, well, at the best is, how would I say that? A real problem.
Yeah.
A
We
real
need,
problem.
it's an instrument. Yeah, but
Correct.
what the others are thinking about this concept is really, really basic. What Massimo
Right.
proposed, the understanding of the human being in nature, not towards nature, in nature. Human being is a natural being. What do you think about it?
Yeah,
How can it be applied to today's problems of green cities, natural cities?
Correct, but I think that we sometimes reduce the idea of nature into green things. But nature is way much more than just, say, the forest or the greenery. It's part of it. But to me, it's something more encompassing than just putting a tree. I love trees, make no mistake. But
Yeah, this is this idea of harmonia and cosmos, also this unity. What? Yeah, please, Sean. No?
The idea of overcoming the separation of things, wouldn't it be a way of thinking like the iPhone being part of nature rather than being something that is not part of nature? Because if you want to overcome a separation, then it's maybe not the best idea to separate something into different classes and things that are good and bad. Maybe because I think when it comes to technology, you always have big capitalistic systems in the background running and people that want something from this technology, but is technology itself a problem?
Yeah. I agree to that. And what you already said, we rather than separating, we have to look. What we can learn from this is that the holistic thing, the integration of all elements, the organization of nature, from that we can learn. Rather than putting things out, we have to learn how to combine them in a way that it fits to our needs and also to the ecological needs, because that is the basis of our life. And I also think that's why putting trees or doing here something like green cities, you have to rethink the city from its whole. You cannot just put some nice things in it. It must be at least a certain area so that it has also a benefit to the city and to the people. And we have
community issue.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And exactly what you said, is it realistic? I think it is realistic because we need it. We can't go further down and down and down. We have to communicate to each other, to understand and to use the things that the resources which are important for our life, to go with that in a careful way. We have to discuss and to communicate and to see that sharing and doing things together is more efficient than the other way.
Okay. What the others are thinking about it. I'm deliberately asking in this distinctive manner, this pushy manner, because this is essentially this concept of the living together, of reuniting with nature and to get another understanding of nature and of ourselves. Also not this separated understanding we have today, even as Massimo had it, even in the today's Green City concept, we have still this Christian heritage of separating the natural from the cultural. This Milano, this Bosco Verticale. This is this Semiramis-like building. As Massimo had it, this is for a few happy rich. It looks good. It is design. It is commedia dell'arte. It does as if nature will be introduced into the city, but it's not the case. It's about a new understanding, and we are mediated. As Proton said it, we are mediated, longer and longer separated. May I play the advocatus diaboli, the devil? How to bring in case of the Western world at least, how to bring millions of alienated solitaires using their iPhones, living in poverty, having 4 jobs in order to survive, how to bring them back to aesthesis, to a holistic conception and to nature. How to do it? How? Next point, what we do with these worldwide urban agglomerations. There are horrible slums that the people have to survive. What to do? Just as highlights. And from these highlights, as back to our self-understanding, when we are speaking about the Bosco Verticale, this commedia dell'arte, this is not bringing back nature into the city. Question to you. If you look at the synoikia, the real living together, the real bringing back nature into the city, how to achieve it today? What do you think?
As Pope Francisco said, you mentioned him, by thinking of the the large community of the poor and the normal people rather than of the rich. And if you start, I mean, and maybe that is only one thing, of piece of how to achieve this. I think that is an important part.
I think eventually there is a political dimension to it. I mean, there's no question about it. We cannot just simply erase poverty by doing better buildings if they cannot afford it.
Yeah.
So that's an entire societal issue, which we right now lack quite a bit.
Okay.
Whatever developed country I can have in mind, first of all, the United States. That's it. So, you know, it is wonderful to talk about it, how to retain nature, but, you know, we are fighting for how to save our own globe in the US, and so it's all political arena.
Politici sociali.
And how to settle this political arena? This raises the classical question, the socialist communist question again. No? We have to make a revolution. In order to achieve the natural city, we have to wipe out all the existing power elites and these systemics, the systemic resilience of a certain economy, of certain power elites, of a certain self-understanding. Let's make revolution. What do you think? How to achieve synergia?
I'm sorry, I'm still with the point before with the poverty. I think it's interesting because looking at people or at poverty itself, when it comes to green cities and CO2, for example, then it's a fact that poor people don't emit as much CO2, which is like kind of the new trend of things. And so it's just like the small rich part that is really summing up CO2 levels. And my thought is here: why is poverty still something that is bad and we have to overcome it? If when we know that this way of life is actually something that we can build up upon.
That's a good point.
Also, like our economic system is very much focused on making us feel that we need things. The needing part in society is very, the economic system is focused on this, and maybe it's also important to think as of the things that we don't need.
Yeah, that is learning from the poor or from that basic way of living, and also what I just recently heard in the news, I don't know who it was an African person who said, now they could learn from us, but they don't ask us. And that is exactly the point, because that is the rich and the powerful never look down or ask the people that are struggling for their life and are much more close to nature and how to survive and to the basic elements of life.
You're right. This is the situation, this is the political framework we cannot change realistically, at least not in the short moment, and revolutions are over since we have the world as app we can consume. Okay. On the other hand, our assets are burning in ecological and social terms. What to do? What we can do in the direction of a natural city? What we can do? The synergia, all these human ideals, and this is basically human, as Massimo said. This is not confined to the Greeks, and it's not outdated. We just moved away from this understanding, miles and miles. How to come back and how to establish a natural city deserving the name for the human being, the conditio humana, as well as for nature, for the human nature and the nature. How to achieve, please?
I think the society has to come to a common thinking to get to ways that are commonly supported, more or less. But the ideas are very separated. That's a kind of technology thing, because we have technology to communicate, but the technology is separating the people into bubbles. And these bubbles are really hard to get out of. it's you don't see it because it's so well established. Like the mind is working, that you stay in your bubble. All these, it's not only algorithms, it's also our how the mind works. So we only accept things that we already know, and this leads to difficulties in getting new insights and discussion.
I would like to say something. I don't believe in the concept in poverty. I think we all strive for something. And obviously it doesn't have to be this ideal of the materialistic world, but the basis of our culture, so that we can talk about polis and civilization and so on, it's all based on a certain wealth and the development. So I guess we have now the dichotomy of how do we produce wealth? We need energy, and we believe that energy is always like destroying our planet. Unless we should really think about why it was already invented till the 60s, you know, the thorium reactor, which was an American project, which they stopped. And we should now think about, the Chinese are building the first reactor, and it's now, I think, next year it's working. And we should rather think why and how could it happen that a superior technology invented till the 60s was blocked. This is a major thing we should think about. Because then we have a big answer, because here we say we have an abundance of resources. We can talk about 30,000 years of reliable energy source, with not the danger of keeping, because of the half-time of reaction of cesium and all this harmful substances. We only have 300 years, and it's not dangerous to operate. So they are now, happily and thankfully, they are in several countries they're working on. It's Denmark, it's Austria and so on. They're working on these thorium reactors, which you can put in a container. So this is quite amazing, and I don't know why it's not in the mainstream. Nobody talks about it, especially Europe now, being blocked off a secure and cheap, not so harmful, but still harmful for environment, gas, for political reasons, obvious reasons, as we know. And why do we let Chinese society go in advance, where in the Western world it was already much further developed? So this is a big question I have, because once you solve the energy in an ecological way, you can bring up global south to a certain wealth, out of poverty, and I think we should think about that, because there's the big balance. And there will be the tremendous help ecological wise, because otherwise if they burn charcoal as they do in India and in China, this is devastating for environment, much more than us relying on Teslas in the city, which is ridiculous.
This is an additional point. To achieve this new understanding and its physical foundations and its social foundations in the synergia, I'm on this topic of this lead idea. We need certain material standards. Second, we have the possibilities, we haven't had the possibilities to easily achieve this as the base, the material base, with these reactors, for instance. They have been blocked out of political reasons, most probably.
Economic.
Purely economic in the 60s?
Well, I would guess so. If you think about, there is an abundance of energy. It's not easy to make money out of it, right? So we also have to think about our capitalistic system, which was, and if we talk about Tesla, we should think about the inventor, and the inventor already electrical transmission. He tried to persuade, because this would be a future, and it was totally blocked. And if we think about why it was blocked, because copper mines was a huge business. So if you make all the cables and so on, so somebody runs out of business, and then that's why the invention got lost. But nowadays we know if we take our handy mobile cell phones, inductive, we can recharge it. So this was already a thing invented almost 100 years ago, right? So I do believe we have to think about how is our economical system preventing this paradise garden we all dream, because then it comes to the city, but first we have to think about the big system.
I think this is an important general point, please.
I also agree,
We skipped
but
the poverty.
thinking of poverty it doesn't mean that we want to reach poverty for us, but that it's only to think back what is the basic, what we need in order to get conscious that we are at the moment wasting a lot, doing as if there is no tomorrow. And I also agree that we have technologies, we will develop further. We can even maybe we have on another way a higher standard living as now due to technique, but also the conscious of that we are at the moment doing not good to us because we are not going good to the other people and to the total environment. I think that conscious is nevertheless needed.
Okay. May I make a short comment due to time? Yeah, please.
We try to identify progress as to consume more. And I certainly disagree with that. Our society is wasteful, and that we separated that we are better off because we can consume more, and all sorts of gadgets and so on, and then recycling, which I will at some point return to, is not done. Plastics are not recycled, even if they are marked that 1, 2, 3. It's an illusion that they are recycled. That's correct. So this is that kind of issue that I don't know if I should use this word. The current economy is like a Ponzi scheme. It's that as long as you consume more and more and more, you can go on until the whole thing collapses. As we know, every Ponzi scheme collapses because the private interest and so on, losing the mine business and so on.
It's a philosophy as regarding the synoikia mindset, this harmonia mindset, this nomos as a personal issue mindset. The reason system is a philosophy for narcissistic solitaires consuming the world. This is social Darwinism in its purest form. And we live in the West, social Darwinism combined with Descartes, also the separation and making the world into object, as in Roman times. So the Roman theatrum was closed. So this is indicative. We have a long tradition in separating ourselves from the world, and now we reached at the end as narcissistic solitaires, having the new myth of a world as app. The world is at my application, seemingly, and so on. Okay, if we are here, if we are standing here, and if it is a question of mindset, of openness to regain the synoikia, the idea of the polis, really revitalize it for a true natural city of good and bad living. Bloody hell, how to get there, also in mental terms. Are we able, if we would have all the material premises, if we would have no political constraints hindering the new advent of a polis as a real new ideal city for a human condition, ceteris paribus, if this all would be given, how we can change our mindsets, how we can rechange from narcissistic solitaires using high-tech and consuming the world to community-oriented beings. How?
Probably it's about our understanding of the world. If we believe in materialism, then it won't happen. If we believe in the mental thing, in the mental thing behind all appearances, maybe that's the way forward.
Okay.
So there's a certain concept of, let's say, theism,
And how to get there?
Science could help
Yeah.
Okay.
to understand quantum physics, that actually we are still living in the consciousness of Newtonian times.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
about 100 years ago should change our total awareness how the world works. That we are not only seeing and perceiving but we are interacting with our environment. And that's quite a major thing. Right? And once it comes there, we have, in contrary to the 20th century, where science and, let's say, spirituality were apart, but now it's like totally connected. And this is so amazing. If we think about the building with the highest cost for science, that's CERN in Geneva, right? But do you know which sculpture is in front of the entrance? That's very fascinating.
No, I don't.
It's the dancing god of Shiva. Can you imagine? We talk about the Western world putting all the expenses for research and science to understand the world, and in front there is the building. I think that's fascinating, because this shows the connectivity in the 21st century of spirituality and science. And once we start there, then I think for the polis we can make a big step.
This is a good point. May I take it due to reasons of organization? We will continue this discussion in the long discussion. Very short, Nicola.
Okay, I have to say, one thing you talked about is one reactor type. And I think it's pretty dangerous when you have at the moment we have pretty good renewable energy sources like wind and solar cells, and many scientists and the EU puts a lot of money in it, for example in fusion reactors. If we make a fusion reactor, everything is solved with energy nowadays. But it's probably taking more than 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 years to have a working fusion reactor. And also the reactor type you talked about. What I know, this isn't working. And also other things. And I think if our world nowadays have problems basically made with technologies, and to solve them with new technologies to make new problems, I think that's a spiral you can't escape.
Well, you talk about problems, and I guess you're very right, because if we think about wind and solar, did you think about that this gives us, the Western world, again, a total dependency on China?
Yes. But
so is that wise if we think about antagonism going politically and ongoing? Then how can you sustain with this volatility of these energy systems an industry that strong and depending on reliable energy like Germany? And as we see, that's exactly what happens. We have a very expensive energy cost. It's about 6 times higher than US. So this will ruin the industrial base of Germany, and by that of Europe. So if it's a dream-like thing, it's a bit of a fantasy, relying on solar and thing. Apart, there was one thing, which was, by the way, by Europeans, that was ABB and Siemens. I thought that was excellent. Maybe you heard about the Desert Check project. Well, the Desert Tech project, somebody knows here, Desert Tech, which was, it was an amazing project by European industry like ABB and Siemens and so, and they were using solar power where it's best used, not here in Germany, obviously, weather condition wise, but let's say in the Sahara Desert, where you have triple times the amount, and that by nowadays, obviously with the cable systems, it works with I think 10% loss of energy, bringing it to Central Europe.
It's an interesting. No. It's an interesting point. We will make it later because we are running out of time. We will go back to this technological basis. Also when I said no, this is not meant adversive. We have to keep the time. We will go back because this is one of our material bases is technology. Can we make it at all and can we realize this new myth of the green city seen in this perspective? No? But now my proposal is let's continue with Barbara. So again, many thanks for Massimo and for Meredith for translating. Many thanks for the discussion. We will return to these points, but now Barbara is bringing her concrete